Welcome to Writing on Caffeine, the podcast where you can come along on a journey with a father and daughter as we attempt to write our first novels. I am Jonathan Franzone, and this is my daughter.
I am Reagan, also Franzone.
Now, because of some scheduling changes, we are not recording at the coffee shop today. Rather, we are sitting at the kitchen table at my house, and we do have some caffeinated drinks with us. Today we are drinking Door County coffee. This is a flavored coffee called Bourbon and Pecan Pie.
It's very good.
And it is quite yummy, yes.
I've also dumped some hazelnut flavored creamer in mine.
I just have sugar and half and half. Today we would like to talk about pantsers versus plotters. This is the method of writing, basically how you put together your book or how you progress in writing your book. So what is a pantser?
I would say a pantser is someone who can sit down without an outline and draft a book. I guess that would be the very basic way of describing it.
Yeah, I think it's in the name, pantser. It's sort of writing by the seat of your pants.
Yep. So
these are people that just sit down with the blank page and write, and whatever comes.
Yeah.
So the opposite of that is a plotter. And what would you say a plotter is?
I would say a plotter is someone who, needs an outline with a description of everything that's going to happen, know how many chapters, what happens in what chapter, and so on.
Right. So basically, plotters need an outline in order to write, and they need to know everything that happens. So which are you? Are you a plotter or a pantser?
That's a good question, because at first, when I first started the process of writing, I thought I would be a pantser because in general life, I am very much a pantser. I have no plans, and I just kind of do what I need to do when it needs to happen.
Right.
But when I started trying to write without an outline, I had a couple breakdowns of anxiety. I was like, I have no idea what's happening. I have no idea where my characters are going. I didn't even know, this sounds weird, I didn't know my characters.
Right.
Like, I don't know how they're going to respond to this situation, like what their personality is. So I needed to kind of outline and plot that out before I could actually get into the nitty-gritty of writing.
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I are probably very similar in that regard. So your mother, my wife, is very much a planner of things in life. So she has lists and to-do items, and if we go anywhere, she needs to know where we're going, how long it's going to take to get there, so when we're leaving, how many bathroom breaks we're going to take, all of those types of things. But me, I'm like, I know we need to get there at this time, so we need to leave here, but everything in between and after we get there is up for grabs.
Yep.
I'm fine just showing up and doing whatever happens. But I've also found that in my writing, I much prefer plotting and outlining because, as you say, like I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to write a book without knowing what the book is about and what's going to happen?
I agree.
Now, I did see there was an article, I can't even remember where it was, but they brought up a third type, which was a plantser, sort of like a planner and a pantser. And this is somewhere in between, so somebody who outlines or plots maybe the highlights of the book.
Like kind of like the major plot points.
Right, exactly. So you want to know the final battle, you want to know the inciting incident, all those major things. But then everything in between, you just kind of write by the seat of your pants. As long as you know where you're going, you just kind of discovery write, I guess they call it.
Yeah. Until
you get there.
Lucky people.
So what are some of the benefits of each of these? Like, what are some pros and cons that you can think of for pantsers?
Well, first of all, I feel like it would probably take, I can't say that because I've never done it, but I would assume that it would take less time to write a first draft as a pantser because you're not spending the time writing an outline.
Right, yeah.
Did you ask for cons, or did you just ask for pros?
Yeah, we can talk about cons, too.
Oh, I was going to say that as a pantser, you might not have important information written down, and so you might have inconsistencies in your novel. like saying, this is what magic looks like. And then a few chapters later, you describe it looking completely different because you forgot, so you just made something up on the spot.
Right. I imagine, I've never written a book, period, but I've never written one that way. But I imagine the editing process for a pantser is much more involved because you would have to go back and iron out any of those inconsistencies and figure out like what you really wanted to do in this chapter as opposed to what you actually wrote.
I have pantsed a few short stories.
Oh, cool.
I think I did a short story competition when I was in high school, and I was required to write a short story as an assignment in high school, and I think I pantsed both of those, and they were an abomination. They were so bad. I'm embarrassed that they exist. So
That's probably due to lack of experience as much as just pantsing them.
I think I posted some of them on my blog.
Oh,
so.
goody. I think one of the benefits or the pros of pantsing is that it takes less planning, obviously, because you're not planning anything.
Yeah.
So finding time to write, you just open up your laptop or get out your notepad, however you're writing. You just sit down and just start writing from wherever you left off. That's an appeal to me because, I have a full-time job and a bunch of kids, and it's hard to find time to write. Just being able to sit down and write is appealing to me. It's just my brain doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
So what are the pros and cons that you might think of for being a plotter?
Well, in contrast to what I said as a con of pantsing is that with plotting you have consistency because you can outline everything, maybe not relatively quickly, but you can kind of have that in one fluid motion, know exactly what you're plotting, and you can even plot twists and lay those Easter eggs kind of around in your novel before having to decide at the end that you want it to be a plot twist and then having to go back and like write in little Easter eggs and stuff. A con is that it takes absolutely forever. It feels like, because I'm still outlining. Like I'm drafting at the same time as I'm outlining.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. I imagine writing a mystery novel would be really difficult as a pantser.
I think probably it would. I agree.
Trying to figure out all of the gotchas and the twists and something like a Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to do that just on the fly.
Mm-mm.
Maybe that guy was brilliant and he just did that.
I don't know. I've read a couple Sherlock Holmes books.
I think another benefit of being a plotter is you mentioned earlier about getting to know your characters.
Yeah.
So if you're outlining and plotting and building character sheets and stuff, you can kind of decide who your characters are, kind of build a backstory so that you know what their motivations are, and even sort of know what their voice is like how do they talk to people, how do they interact with other people.
Yeah.
And that might help so that your characters aren't just
shallow
different versions of you.
Right, yeah.
Saying the same thing in the same way, just from different mouths.
Yeah. I think another thing, too, is when you're plotting, you kind of follow your characters from start to finish in that outline, and so you know what their arc is going to be. You kind of suffer through that trauma of the novel, with them that first time, and then you can write them better the second time.
Right, yeah. So are there any tools, are there any specific plotting methods that you are using?
I'm just kind of working out of, what is it, Scrivener, I think? Scrivener, and I made, at the very beginning, I went through that Plan Your Book PDF that you sent me, which was very helpful. I still use that often. I went through and kind of outlined my characters and then just started going from there. I think my outline has changed about 5 times, though, since I wrote the original outline. So we'll see how this one goes.
Speaking of, that's probably one of the cons of plotting is just forever plotting.
Yes.
Forever outlining and never actually writing your book.
Yeah.
So we'll have to keep each other accountable to actually do the writing.
Mm-hmm.
That PDF I sent you, I believe that was a guy named Derek Murphy. He's an author. I'll post a link to his website in the show notes, but he has an outlining method called the Plot Dot. I think that's what it's called. But it's basically a 24 chapter outline, and it uses the 3-act story structure, but he breaks up the middle act, which is always kind of the really huge act. He breaks that up into 2 different acts. So it ends up being like a 4-act outline.
Yeah.
I'm using the same thing. I really like it. I started out using something else, and then I switched to that when I found it because I found it intriguing. So I've actually only got about half of my novel outlined. So I'm just taking all of those 24 chapters that he lists, and he describes in them, like, this is when you need to be doing something like this, and this is when your inciting incident is. Yeah. And he even goes as far as to describe at some of your crucial points, okay, this should typically be like an internal struggle versus an external struggle.
Right.
So I'm trying to go through there and just describe in a paragraph or 2 what exactly is going to happen in that chapter.
Right.
And once I get that whole thing worked out, I feel like I'll be able to just sit and write.
Yeah. I think something that really stuck out to me was when I was reading through that outline was during one of the chapters, kind of under the headline, it says, all of your characters need to be introduced by this point.
Right.
Which I was like, oh, this is very helpful because I probably would just like keep adding people forever and ever, which is terrible. I hate reading books like that. But as a writer, I'd be like, oh, what if I introduce this character? What about this guy?
Right, yeah. Of course, it probably depends a little bit on the genre that you're writing in. Mm-hmm. Like if you're writing an epic fantasy that's going to be like 100,000 words long, you could probably drag that out quite a bit longer.
Yeah. I agree.
But for something like a middle grade or YA, you probably do need to have them all introduced a bit sooner.
Yeah. Young teens tend to get bored quickly.
Absolutely. As we wrap up, what is it that you are reading? Are you still reading the same things, or have you finished up and moved on?
I am still reading The Shadows of What Was Lost and The Alloy of Law, but I did start a new book, and I finished it.
Oh, did you?
Yes. It was called The Kingdom of the Wicked, which is a YA fantasy, kind of murder mystery type book about a witch whose sister dies, and she has to summon a demon to
she's a witch.
Find out who killed her sister. And I tend to sprinkle in easy read books in with my more difficult reads because I'll be reading this book for 6 months, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to change something. So I'll pick up, a YA book and read a little bit about this fun little world and then go back to something else. It was okay.
What was that called again?
It's called The Kingdom of the Wicked.
Oh, okay.
By Carrie Maniscalco. It was not my favorite book ever. It was a little bit agitating, but,
Okay. I should probably take that advice and sprinkle in some easier reading because I still have the 2 pretty heavy lifting books that I'm trying to choke through. That is Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand and
Anti-Fragile.
That's right. Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, or Taleb. I don't know how you pronounce it. Mm-hmm. They're both still really good, but they are huge.
Yeah.
So I probably should find something lighter. Well, thank you for joining us in this 3rd episode of Writing on Caffeine. We hope you'll join us again in 2 weeks. Please visit the website, writingoncaffeine.com, where you can view the show notes and subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That's right. Check, check, check.
Testing.
Yeah, it's recording. Nice preemptive slurp.